Hi all, good morning. Welcome to our seventh Sustainable and Resilient Infrastructure seminar series. My video is busted, so sorry about that. So what we'll do, we'll talk. I'll talk for about 4 minutes maybe, and then it's over to Albert Slap for his talk. A lot of you are already aware of what the tech hubs are, what we're doing, but let me go over it very, very quickly. The Risk and Resilience Tech Hub is a public-private partnership working across our four-county region, Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe. It aims to commercialize solutions for our changing relationships with water and extreme weather. It is one of 31 federally designated tech hubs, and the overarching projects are next generation concrete, workforce, and governance. And you can see the leads beside the bullet points. I want to clarify that this is not a research project. We really want to reduce barriers to implementation of new technology, to result in good jobs, to result in thriving startups, to result in a strong, resilient economy, infrastructure, and stronger national security. The parts of the components of the projects are given on the right. And yeah, this is a number of different things: concrete, the wall of wind, resilience. So broadly speaking, if you're trying to make us safer, if you're trying to prevent flooding, if you're making stronger concrete, all of those things are relevant to the tech hub. So more broadly, the areas that we address include energy efficient buildings, coastal defense, and clean cement. And you can see that these are not independent. These do interact with each other in a way where you can see in this picture, which shows, from deep inside to into the water, how each of these different technologies can help. Uh, we do a number of different things, which include high TRL research, working with startups, commercializing technologies, and I would be happy to discuss what those are with you separately. This specific event is the Sustainable and Resilient Infrastructure Seminar Series. The idea here is that we educate and bring awareness to high TRL technologies to accelerate their adoption. So it's not likely that you will hear about my fundamental research in this seminar series. That's not the point. But if you have a product or if you have a technology that's fairly high TRL, this is the perfect avenue. It is critical to establish connections between various stakeholders. So maybe you join this and you go, oh my goodness, this is absolutely what I want. This helps me. Or, hey, look, this is amazing. This is something that I would add to my portfolio as a VC. Or as an academic, maybe you say, oh, you know what, I want to write a proposal with these people. So that's the idea of the seminar series. And ultimately, sometimes we do talk about lower TRL technologies, but then the idea would be to rapidly increase the TRL. We do want to advance startups. We do want to advance technologies. So a lot of these are startup related, but not all of them. So we've had 6 seminars so far. This is the seventh one. And here are the details of the next several ones in the chat. I think we are more or less set till August or something next year. If any of you would like to give a chat, please let me know. I would be absolutely delighted to chat with you. So I've talked for a long time now. I think I have to give it over to Albert. Albert is president and co-founder of Coastal Risk Consulting LLC, a geospatial technology, modeling and analytics company located in South Florida. And he's going to talk about his risk footprint technology and the future of resilience-based hazard assessment. Albert has done a whole bunch of different things. I'm not going to go over the details of all of his accomplishments. But apart from being heavily involved with coastal risk work, he's also been an adjunct at FIU and at other places as well. So thank you, Albert, for agreeing to do this. We're really happy to have you here. We think this is going to be a wonderful talk, and it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So good morning. It's great to be here with you and address the Risk and Resilience Tech Hub community. Probably where most of you are, it's 75 degrees and sunny. Our company is headquartered in Boca Raton, but for the holidays, I'm visiting family in Indianapolis right now, and it's a wind chill of 6 degrees outside and lightly snowing. When we arrived here, it was 2 degrees, so it's warmed up a bit. So, I'm honored to be a part of this program, and I want to thank Pranoy, and I also want to congratulate him for really doing such a great job with this program. Let me get my thing on the full screen here. Hold on. Okay, great. So the year 2025 is rapidly drawing to a close, and it's good for all of us to reflect on what is it really going to take in the next year and the following years to achieve resilience and sustainability in our built environment, given the increasing incidence, severity, and damage of floods, natural hazards, extreme weather made worse by our warming climate. So what is it going to take? Today, I'm not going to be talking about public infrastructure part of this, and you've heard about that. And frankly, most of this program has been focused on the public infrastructure. But I'm going to focus on privately owned buildings, residential and commercial. I'm going to tell you a bit about my company and what it does to help make these private buildings safer and more resilient, and how we do that. But first, I'm going to have you listen to a short video podcast that we put together, and I think it'll be a good segue into my presentation.
Welcome to the podcast from your RiskFootprint resilience team. We're your pathway to smarter hazard and climate preparedness, offering clear insights, actionable solutions, and expert support to help you safeguard your properties and build true resilience.
Okay, so we all know that climate disasters are becoming, well, the new normal. So the big question is, how do we make our buildings, the places we work, we shop, we live, how do we make them safer and more secure? Today, we're going to break down the playbook for turning vulnerable properties into truly resilient assets. So let's just start with the big picture here. We are not talking about a few isolated incidents anymore. I mean, look at this map from NOAA. This shows 27 separate billion-dollar weather events in just 1 year. Wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods. Seriously, no part of the country is being left untouched. And you've got to remember, this isn't just about our homes. So much of our society's economic value is tied up in these larger buildings, offices, factories, retail spaces. And when they go down, like you're seeing right here, it causes just a massive ripple effect of disruption, displaced tenants, and some really serious financial pain. Which brings us to a whole new reality, really. Protecting these critical assets, hardening them against disaster, well, it's not some optional upgrade anymore. It has become a core part of the annual business process for anyone who wants to preserve their economic value. It's a must-do. So here's the crucial question, right? How do you actually make smart, data-driven investments to protect your buildings? How do you get past the guesswork and put in retrofits that give you a real, tangible return on that investment? Well, the answer is a standardized, repeatable process. We're talking about a system that can take a property from an initial high-level hazard assessment all the way through to a certified resilient retrofit that you can actually prove to your lenders, your investors, and your insurers. Now, let's be super clear about what we mean by certification. This is not just some sticker you slap on a window. No way. This is a rigorous third-party verification. It's proof that the protection you paid for was installed exactly as it was designed, using the right materials and with professional oversight. It's your evidence. And, why go through all this trouble? The goal is pretty simple, and it's twofold. First, you want to make decisions based on a clear return on investment. And second, you want to gain leverage with your insurance providers. That could lead to credits or lower premiums because you can prove with data that your asset is less risky. Okay, so let's get into the playbook itself. It's a 3-step process, and it's been formalized by the American Society for Testing and Materials, or ASTM. It's called the Property Resilience Assessment, or PRA for short. Honestly, the best way to think about the PRA is like a medical checkup for your building. Step 1 is kind of like the initial screening. What are the potential threats? Step 2 is the deep diagnostic. How vulnerable is the building, and what's the potential damage in dollars and cents? And finally, step 3 is the treatment plan. What are the specific things we can do to protect it? All right, let's break down that first step, the hazard ID. This is where we identify every single potential hazard a property might face, from the really obvious stuff to the things you might have overlooked. And it starts at a pretty high level. You use tools like this risk footprint dashboard to screen an entire portfolio of properties. I'm talking buildings all over the country, and it flags dozens of different climate hazards both now and in the future. But then it gets really granular. You get these scored spreadsheets that break down all the risks for each individual location. And this is huge because it allows owners to compare their properties and prioritize which ones need attention first. And this is where it gets really visual. It brilliantly illustrates that data on a map. You can immediately see where you have these geographic concentrations of high-risk assets, which helps the decision makers see exactly where their portfolio is most vulnerable. So that brings us to stage 2. And this is where we shift from just identifying hazards to assessing the real vulnerability. In other words, we stop asking what could happen, and we start calculating what would the financial damage actually be. To do that, the pros use some pretty sophisticated modeling tools. A key one is called HAZIS. It's this powerful software package from FEMA, and it can estimate the real-world financial losses from damage to the structure, to the contents, and even from business interruption. It's a game changer. And all of that analysis brings us to stage 3, the treatment plan. After you've identified the risks and you've quantified the potential losses, the experts can then recommend specific practical solutions to harden the building and bring that risk way down. And these resilience measures, they can range pretty widely depending on the threat, right? They could be physical things like these deployable flood barriers or impact-resistant windows. Or they could be more operational, like making sure you have energy independence with backup generators and solar arrays. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, doesn't it? But what's the proof? I mean, does going through this whole process actually protect buildings and save money? Does it deliver that return on investment we talked about? Oh, absolutely. Take a look at this case study of a historic hotel down in Key West. Before they did the retrofit, a major flood was projected to cause damage equal to over 3% of the building's total replacement cost. After the retrofit, that damage dropped to 0. Zilch. And get this, restoration time fell from 450 days to just 30. And here's another really powerful example. For a different building that was facing a high wind risk, retrofitting with things like hurricane straps and modern windows led to a 75% reduction in the potential structural loss from a major storm. I mean, these are real quantifiable results. And you know who's paying very close attention to numbers like that? The insurance industry. When you can prove you've reduced your risk with this kind of data, insurers respond. You've got major providers like FM Global now offering hundreds of millions of dollars in financial credits to clients who make these proven investments in resilience. So here's the crucial takeaway. This framework, it's not about a one-time fix. It's about building a new ongoing culture of resilience. It's about making it part of a building's year-round operations, part of its DNA. You see, true resilience is a continuous cycle. It means inspecting your assets every year, prioritizing what needs to be fixed, and then actually doing the repairs. It means testing your systems, training your staff, and constantly updating your plans. It's a living process that's designed to keep you ahead of these evolving risks. And that really just leaves us with this final thought. As the threats from our changing climate continue to grow, we really have to ask ourselves, is the real risk the cost of proactively retrofitting our world, or is it the exponentially greater cost of just doing nothing at all?
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. To learn more, visit riskfootprint.com.
Okay. Let us go back to.
You cannot win with slow hands. In this video, I've got 5 tips for you to win more hands battles. So I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. I think hand speed might be the most important
Do
skill.
you want to close your browser, your
Here's the
YouTube?
reason. If you're the best thinker on the court, if you're the
We don't want to hear pickleball. Okay, we'll go to this. let's go into this. And let me see, stop my share. Okay. Go back to this, sorry. That. Sometimes this happens when you share a video. Okay. So we saw this slide, this 2024 slide from NOAA. Unfortunately, because of the politics today, we're not going to see this again for a while, not in 2025. But what we learned from this is that there are a lot of extreme events every year, and those number of extreme events are growing. Here, I've put together the history of hurricanes in Florida on the East Coast and the West Coast from 1992 to last year. This year, we were very fortunate about the hurricanes. Looking at Hurricane Ian in 2022, which caused massive damage on the West Coast, and Hurricanes Milton and Helene in 2024. And of course, we start in 1992 with Hurricane Andrew. And of course, I remember that well because after my dad had passed away in 1991, my mom sold their condo in Key Largo and bought a condo in Boca Raton in 1991. And in 1992, the people that she had sold the condo to in Key Largo, the roof blew off their house. So she just avoided that. And of course, when we look at all of these events, we really can't forget the human suffering component, which is just tremendous. My main point today, the point that I'm really going to try to get across to you, is that we need public infrastructure and public infrastructure upgrades like roads and bridges, water and sewer, energy grids, seawalls. But without a resilient private, commercial, and residential sector, who's going to be using that infrastructure? Professionals in the area of resilient call this the stranded asset problem. We need to mitigate greenhouse gases, but without an all-hands-on-deck approach to resilience, the result for many communities will be dysfunction and retreat long before reducing CO2 levels has any positive effect. Let me crystallize my thought here. Over-focus, I call it over-focus, on public infrastructure upgrades to achieve resilience, which we also call adaptation, is a fruitless endeavor without simultaneously making our existing commercial and residential building stock more resilient. We just, we're focusing, and a lot of groups and local governments are focusing only on the infrastructure and not on private businesses and private buildings, both residential and commercial. King tides, a harbinger of the coastal future. I took both of these pictures. The one on the left is a client's home on a canal in Fort Lauderdale at sunny day king tide flooding. And the second one was at a restaurant across the intercoastal, which I took this picture of a condo building, and you can see that at king tide, the water's almost overtopping the land there, and the building is so close to the water. And what does this mean? I mean, some local governments are working to reduce the impact of king tides with the current king tides of sea level rise by raising roads, enlarging stormwater systems, installing pumps. But these are only temporary measures. What are the more permanent solutions? What will they cost? Raising roads, raising houses, making the second floors of big buildings their new lobbies, and the first floors are sacrificial. Some well-funded cities and towns may be able to upgrade for a while their infrastructure, but probably many won't succeed. And there's the whole issue of the disparity in the local governments in terms of the tax ratables. So you look at Miami Beach, obviously has a lot of tax ratables. Is already trying to do some things on Alton Road and other places to deal with king tides. You see here a page of our risk footprint report on the right. The top frame, in if it's a coastal property, shows you the NOAA current estimate. The red pixels are the NOAA current estimate for 2025 of king tide flooding, and the building, the city hall, is in the black outline here, the polygon here. So you see these red pixels, and NOAA estimates 11 days in 2025 of king tide flooding in that area. But if you look out using NOAA and NASA data, and this is again included in the risk footprint report, you see how much king tide flooding, unless something is done, will increase by 2040 and 2060. And so we have to ask ourselves, not just what can be done in infrastructure, but simultaneously, what will the homeowners, and you can see single family and condos over here on the left, and then you see whether it's retail or commercial buildings over here on the right near the city hall, and of course you have the convention center up there. And will these communities have the funds, and will they have will the residential and commercial owners have the willingness to do what needs to be done? And of course, we don't know the answer to that. So let's move away from the coast for a second, and let's talk about inland heavy rainfall. And here you see two pictures, kind of a funny one on the left with an alligator enjoying the flooding in an inland area of Florida. And then on the right, the devastation in Asheville, North Carolina, with the remnants of Hurricane Helene. But of course, this was all riverine and heavy rainfall flooding. And so, you ask yourself, how are we preparing ourselves and commercial buildings and residential buildings for this? This is another slide I have of the Asheville situation. On the left, you can see another picture of the just devastating flooding in Asheville. And of course, most people, you read in the newspapers after that, we didn't know this was going to happen. Of course, Asheville suffered devastating flood in 1916 and again in 2014. And you have to, go back to the, the old adage, it's that you can't fail to protect against a known danger. And in 2016, on the front page of the Asheville newspaper, the headline was, 100 years after the flood of 1916, the city of Asheville is ready for the next one. Well, they weren't ready for the next one, and it devastated Asheville. But what did the risk footprint report, what did our Fathom Swiss Ray flood maps show for a 1,000-year storm, which is what this was, what it would do to this same area of Asheville? And if you look at the flood map on the right and you look at the legend, you can see that in certain areas, the model showed over 4 meters or 13 feet above the ground level of flooding. So this is what we're living in right now. And the FEMA flood maps, which have been a centerpiece of policy for 40 plus years, don't include heavy rainfall flooding. I've said this hundreds of times. It's been in every news and professional journals that FEMA flood maps, which control the National Flood Insurance Program, and whether you need flood insurance with your mortgage, doesn't include heavy rainfall flooding. And here's an example of one property in Los Angeles that we did for a bank, and this was a multifamily complex in LA. You can see in the lower right the FEMA flood map, which is in all of our risk footprint reports, shows a very large X zone, which is the lowest risk, lower than a 0.2% or 500-year flood. But if you look at the Fathom Swiss Re map on the left, you can see that heavy rainfall risks in an extreme event would again put more than 4 plus meters. And why is this significant? Where it rains, it can flood. That just anywhere in the country where it rains, it can flood. And
You want to see something?
Say again.
No, go ahead. Someone had their video,
Okay.
someone had their audio on.
That's okay. So nationally, the uptake rate for single family homes of the National Flood Insurance Program or flood insurance is 4%, only 4%. And in Florida, where we have the highest uptake rate, it's only 18%. So no wonder when there's flooding from hurricanes or extreme rainfall or riverine that so many Americans suffer nearly existential losses to their homes and possessions because they're not insured. And this is really terrible for our society that so many residential and commercial buildings are not resilient. And that's just the baseline. And insurance is part of resilience, and they're not even insured. So let's shift gears for a minute from all of those problems and tell you a little bit about my company and why we're doing what we're doing. So when we formed Coastal Risk Consulting, it was our idea and our concept to create a hybrid, both consulting and technology. And we did this with a world-class science and technology team. Dr. Len Berry, who is an emeritus professor at Florida Atlantic University and was the founding director of the Florida Center for Environmental Studies. Dr. Brian Soden, he's a world-renowned climatologist at the Rosenstiel School at UM, and the co-recipient of the Nobel Prize with Vice President Al Gore. And Professor Brian McNoldy, also of University of Miami, who's well known for his seasonal hurricane blogs and reports tracking the annual king tides in South Florida. So that was our team. And Pranoy asked me if we are currently seeking any funding. So I threw this slide in. Yes, we're always looking for angel investors. We are a Florida LLC. We were founded in 2014. RiskFootprint is our tech subsidiary. We've raised approximately $2 million in angel and friends and family. Our last angel round was at a $7.5 million pre-money valuation. We have no VCs, just angels and friends and family and our LLC members. The majority control is by senior management. And as a hybrid company, approximately 60% of our sales are the risk footprint reports, technology, and 40% is consulting. So what was our idea? Our idea was that we could create intellectual property, which was the risk footprint dashboard and reports, and that it would be usable and useful for a variety of sub-markets. So one of the big submarkets, of course, is due diligence. That when I mention how limited a FEMA flood map is, that's part of due diligence. But we wanted to have a software as a service product that really would expand due diligence. So due diligence and underwriting, insurance underwriting, lender underwriting, mortgage lenders, help governments with their vulnerability and adaptation plans. We've done a number of studies for vulnerability for local governments in South Florida, helping ESG type funds on their portfolio risk awareness, and developers, and then finally PACE and green banks again on the underwriting side. So when we started this in 2014, about 10 years ago, we really didn't have a lot of competition. But as the whole ESG and sustainability and disclosure initiatives grew first in Europe and then became regulations in the UK and in the EU, some very large players began to emerge, Moody's, Munich Re, and others. Now, their tools, the tools that they developed, were mostly for passive, large, multi-billion-dollar passive investment funds who wanted to show and disclose their greenness, and that would have to do with both greenhouse gas issues and later on physical climate risks. But those tools were mostly focused on the future and future climate risks, and they mostly generated scores 1 to 10, 1 to 100, and they typically, unlike our risk footprint, didn't include property level maps. And I affectionately called these vendors bad news bears. And I called them bad news bears because if they ran a report on your property and there was bad news from either climate or physical risk standpoint, that's what they did. They showed that to you and they said, like this cute little guy, have a nice life. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. And we did not want to be a bad news bear. So we decided that our business model was going to be the Resilience Sherpa. And what we mean by that is that a Sherpa helps both guide you up the path, let's call it the path of resilience, and it also helps carry the load. So that's what we're striving to become, the Resilience Sherpas, not a bad news bear. And so we developed what we called a Be Resilient process, which is a 6-step process. The first step was portfolio risk screening, a deeper dive with the risk footprint report for property level risk assessment, an even deeper dive with damage loss calculations. Step 4 was to look at what was feasible from a risk mitigation standpoint and cost estimation. Step 5 was architectural and engineering recommended solutions, and 6 was implementation, more than just the bad news. And in doing that, we got some pretty, big and well-regarded clients: Principal Financial Group, American Realty Advisors, Brandywine, Intertech, Socotec, Bureau Veritas, and other similar companies. And last year, and typically, our technology will support well over $2 billion in real estate investments, loans, and development. Is there anything that has helped us along in our goal to become a well-regarded and successful company? Well, in the last year, the ASTM has promulgated a standard. I was on the committee, worked for 2-3 years with many others to help get this standard in place called the Property Resilience Assessment Standard, this 3-step process. And this is really one of the most important events that has occurred in the resilience field, which is a standardized process, 3-step process. We have a 6-step process. And their process is hazard assessment, which would be our risk footprint report. Stage 2, the vulnerability and the value at risk, which is what we do with the HAZUS model. And 3, identify resilience measures and costs. But they stop, the ASTM stops before like the Sherpa part that would involve architectural and engineering recommendations. So there's a difference between identifying resilience measures and then recommending what should be done at your particular building. And then implementation is also outside the scope of the PRA, but it definitely put some wind in our sails. This is what our dashboard looks like. It uses a Google Maps front end. It also has a hand drawing tool where you can make polygons and get risk footprint reports and Excel spreadsheet scores for any sort of a polygon, whether there's a Google Maps address or not. This is what a scored spreadsheet looks like. There's 15 in our spreadsheet, there's 15 different hazards and an aggregate score. This is qualitative scoring, which is stoplight, green, yellow, red. But we use this again as an initial round for clients to look at what their core assets are and how they're ranked. But then we dive into the 30-page risk footprint report, which is very comprehensive and detailed and quantified with 34 plus current hazards, 4 future climate impacts, up-to-date aerial imagery, highly granular modeling like the Fathom Swiss Re flood maps at 10-meter resolution, quantitative assessments we use from True Flood Risk, an artificial intelligence estimate using Google Street View of the finished floor height, which really helps us get into vulnerability assessments to compare the finished floor height of a building to the flood inundation depths from all of our different models. And again, I mentioned the hand drawing tool. When we get into the deeper dive, when someone, whether it's a homeowner or it's the owner of a large building, has to make a decision, I'm at risk, am I going to do anything? And what's the return on my investment? Is it really going to be worth it? Am I going to live in this house for a number of years? Am I going to own this building? Am I buy and hold? Am I on a 10-year CMBS? What's the ROI? And so in order to quantify this, in order to get down, we have to look at the vulnerability, not just the exposure, but the vulnerability and the value at risk. And that's what we do. That's part of our Sherpa work. And there are actually some new competitors to ours that believe that everything can be done on the desktop with models. And that's not true. When you own a big building, whether it's a rental apartment building or a condo or an office building, every building's different. And once we've done our desktop work to look at exposure, to look at vulnerability to different scenarios and the value at risk, and the owners of the building say, okay, we really got to do something here. We need to send into the building hazard-specific experts, like you can see in the pictures here, to work with the building managers to understand what's happened before, how high the water or the wind got, what blew off the building, windows that cracked or blew in, et cetera. And then they're going to come up with very specific plans of what can be done and cost estimates. So now we get into, again, the Sherpa work of the retrofit, the implementation. So as you can see, I'm taking the client from the technology part, which happens software as a service online in a matter of seconds, where in a matter of seconds, we're doing a risk footprint report for any property in the United States, Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. And now we're getting into what can be done, what are you going to do, and how we take you through this implementation, which is A&E level, architect and engineering level, retrofit, assist with an RFP, request for proposal, selection of contractors and vendors, monitor a neutral third party, monitor construction and implementation, certification of final construction, field testing, roof uplift, leakage from flood barriers, and even help the client negotiate insurance coverages and premiums. I know that a lot of you in the audience are coming from a sustainability and green building background. And I want you to know that in this process, this hardening, gray infrastructure and buildings, we're not forgetting about sustainability, and we're not forgetting about the potential as we're going through this process of CO2 reductions, energy efficiency, wellness, and all those other things. And in fact, this year, the new LEED version 5, for the first time, includes a prerequisite for property resilience assessment, credits for resilience measures in site building design, credits for indirectly supporting resilience, and new project priority credits for resilience. So we don't forget about that. And finally, my last slide is that the resilience is not a destination, it's a process. And the fact that we may come in and help you with improving the wind resistance of your roof or your glazing or flood barriers or something to do with wildfire and reducing fuels around your building, it has to be part of an ongoing process every year. We can't just, say one and done. So the owner has to embed resilience into year-round operations that includes annual inspections and repairs, testing and training of the building maintenance staff, updating emergency operation plans, and staying ahead of evolving risks to preserve asset value. So that really takes me to the end of what I wanted to say, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have about who we are and what we do. And again, thank you very much for your attention, and thanks, Pranoy, for inviting me to speak to your group.